You know, there's something unmistakable about the silence that God allowed Zacharias to endure. 9 months is a long time to sit with your own disbelief over a promise God gave directly through the Archangel Gabriel. That's long enough for the inner sanctum sanctorum in your heart to get ruthlessly self honest. And while his wife Elizabeth was carrying John the Baptist in her womb, Zacharias was carrying something of his own. He was being held in a season where he had to face the distance between what God had spoken and what he was able or capable of taking in. Now, before we get too tough on Zacharias, that gap is familiar to any and all of us who have ever wrestled with promise and impossibility in the same breath. God wasn't punishing Zacharias, God was forming him. In his advanced years, when most assume their story is settled, the Spirit was working in the hidden places, shaping a man who would speak not from entitlement or certainty, but from a renewed consciousness of priest turned prophet. By the time his son was born, the man who opened his mouth had been reshaped from the inside out. His voice carried the weight of someone who had been met by God in the quiet and had actually yielded to the work of that meeting. And when speech returned, it carried a profound clarity that feels as fresh today as it did then. Zechariah's song announces that God breaks in where barrenness has lingered. God remembers the covenant when we've grown tired. God brings freedom when fear has become all too familiar to us. Zacharias blesses the Lord because he has seen that the God of Israel has indeed come near, not as an idea, not as a memory, as a living presence who sets his people free. He names what is unfolding in the very fruit of his loins, his son John. He sees that the child will go ahead of the Lord, preparing a way through hardened ground. He speaks of salvation that reaches into the hidden guilt that has kept Israel bowed down. He speaks of a mercy that doesn't shame us, but meets us with steadfast love. And then he lifts our eyes. The dawn from on high is breaking in. Light for those who sit in the darkness. Light for those who feel the cold shadow of death. Light that steadies our feet on a way where peace becomes possible. This is not only Zechariah's moment. It reaches into every generation that longs for a fresh inbreaking of God's Spirit. His song reminds all of us that the places in us that feel barren are not abandoned. The same God who visited an aging priest turned prophet in the silence of his own wrestling comes to visit us. And the same Spirit who shaped a prophet in Elizabeth's womb is still preparing hearts for the kingship of Christ. Advent, beloved, is not nostalgia, it's readiness. It's the willingness to let God speak into our impossibilities and form us for what lies ahead. And so as we hear Zechariah's voice rise after 9 months of deep quiet, we're reminded that the Spirit does not waste silence. The Spirit uses it to prepare us for a word that carries life, freedom, and a path to shalom, the absence of all things harmful, the presence of all things beneficial, nothing missing, nothing broken, the peace that passes all understanding.